Rain clung to the cracked asphalt in thin, trembling sheets, reflecting the orange flicker of the sheriff's cruiser lights. The town had gone quiet hours ago, but at the edge of the county road. The K-9 sat rigid, unmoving, eyes locked on an old canvas backpack lying in the ditch. His ears didn't twitch. His tail didn't stir. Just that cold, unwavering stare. Sheriff Donnelly eased closer, boots sinking into wet gravel. Each step a whisper against the night. The dog's low growl vibrated in the air. "Chief!" the deputy called softly. "You might want to see this." "Like the story? Stay with us. There's more you won't want to miss." Sheriff Donnelly had learned to trust Duke's instincts over the last 7 years. The K-9 wasn't given to theatrics. If he froze like that, it meant something was wrong. Dead wrong. The storm had passed only an hour earlier, leaving the night heavy and slick. Donnelly's flashlight beam caught raindrops still clinging to tall grass, the glow shimmering around the object in the ditch. "Back him up," Donnelly said without looking at Deputy Harris. Harris, young and jumpy, tugged lightly on Duke's lead. The shepherd didn't move. His low rumble only deepened. Donnelly crouched, knees popping, and swept the beam over the backpack. It was old but not ancient, canvas frayed along the seams, zippers tarnished. The patches stitched on the front caught his eye. One was a faded emblem of Pine Hollow High School, the other a peace symbol hand-sewn in crooked stitches. He felt the night closing around him. Pine Hollow had seen little trouble in the last decade, but certain names, certain memories, still festered under the surface. "Harris," he said quietly, "call it in. And for God's sake, keep folks back." The deputy jogged toward the cruiser, his boots splashing in puddles. Donnelly reached out, pinching the fabric of the backpack strap between 2 fingers, lifting it gently. It felt heavier than it looked. Water dripped from the bottom. A sour, metallic scent seeped out. He knew that smell too well. The zipper was stiff, but it slid open under steady pressure. The beam caught something pale inside, too pale for clothing. His stomach tensed. And then he saw it. 2 hours earlier. The call had come in from Mrs. Blake, who lived along Route 17. She'd reported some strange yelling out by the tree line behind her property, followed by the sound of a car speeding off. Donnelly had sent Harris to check, figuring it was nothing more than a couple of teenagers testing each other's courage. But when Harris radioed back about finding Duke acting weird, Donnelly drove out himself. The last time Duke had gone still like that, they'd found the remains of a missing hiker. By the time Donnelly arrived, the rain had thinned to a mist curling in the headlights. Now, Donnelly let the zipper drop and stared into the shadows of the ditch. His mind worked through scenarios, each one worse than the last. "Chief." Harris's voice came from behind, hesitant. "State's on their way." They said 30 minutes. Donnelly didn't answer right away. He shifted his flashlight back into the backpack, taking in the details. The skin was waxy, the fingers curled in on themselves, nails rimmed with dirt. Whoever it was had been dead for at least a day. But there was something else. Something clutched in that lifeless hand. A strip of paper, crumpled but still legible. "I know who took her." Donnelly's chest tightened. Inside the station, Pine Hollow's walls were lined with framed photographs of smiling Little League teams, church picnics, and summer fairs. But behind his desk, Donnelly kept a locked drawer. Inside were files a town liked to forget, cases without closure, names without answers. One file sat on top, case hashtag 04-217, Marissa Cleary. Marissa had vanished 6 years ago, walking home from a friend's house one evening. No witnesses, no trace, just an abandoned bicycle near the creek bed. Her father had accused half the town in the months after, burning bridges until he left for good. And now this note. "You think it's her?" Harris asked, leaning in the doorway. "I think," Donnelly said slowly. "We don't assume anything." "Not yet." Harris shifted on his feet. "You're pale, Chief, like you've seen a ghost." Donnelly shut the drawer and stood. "Go home. Harris, get some sleep." "But that's an order." When Harris was gone, Donnelly sat back down. The rain had started again, ticking softly against the window. In Pine Hollow, news traveled faster than lightning. By morning, everyone would know about the backpack, and someone, whoever put it there, would know the sheriff had seen that note. He looked over at the corkboard on the wall. Marissa's photograph stared back, bright-eyed, 13 years old, braces catching the sun. 3 miles away, at the edge of the old Miller farm, a figure stood in the barn's open doorway, watching the rain. The barn smelled of rot and hay, the beams groaning in the wind. In the far corner sat another backpack, identical to the one in Donnelly's truck. The figure reached down, dragging a finger along the dusty floorboards. Then they smiled, slow, deliberate, and began to hum a tune no one in Pine Hollow had heard in years. The next morning, the diner was half full, locals hunched over coffee and eggs. Conversations dipped when Donnelly walked in. He tipped his hat, but didn't smile, heading straight for a corner booth where Mary Ann Cleary sat alone. She looked older than her 35 years, her hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes sharp despite the sleepless nights she was known for. "I heard," she said before he sat. "Rumors travel," he replied. "Is it her?" "I can't say." "You mean you won't?" Donnelly met her gaze. "If I had answers, you'd be the first to know. But this, what I found, it complicates things." Her hand tightened on the coffee mug. "Complicates?" "After 6 years, nothing's complicated. She's either alive or she's not." Donnelly considered his next words carefully. "The note in that bag said it knows who took her." Mary Ann's expression shifted, hope flickering, then hardening into something else. "And you believe it?" "I believe someone wants us to." That night, back at the station, Donnelly sat in the dim light, the note spread out before him. He'd stared at those words for hours. "I know who took her." If it was a prank, it was cruel. If it was real, it meant the truth had been buried deeper than he'd imagined. Duke lay at his feet, ears flicking at every sound. At 1:12 a.m., the dogs had lifted, his body tense. Donnelly froze. From outside, through the steady rain, came the crunch of tires on gravel. The sound of the tires stopped just short of the station. Donnelly rose slowly, his chair creaking as Duke padded toward the door, nails clicking against the linoleum. The rain outside had turned heavy, each drop a sharp hiss on the tin awning. The sheriff moved to the window, careful to keep his profile in the shadows. A dark pickup sat in the lot, engine idling, headlights cutting through the mist. The driver's door opened, but no one stepped out. Donnelly felt Duke stiffen beside him. "Stay," he murmured. The passenger window slid down a few inches. Something small and square landed in the puddle beside the front tire. Paper, maybe cardboard. Then the truck rolled away, taillights vanishing into the dark. Donnelly waited until the sound of the engine faded completely before stepping out. The air was colder than before, a damp bite in the wind. He knelt by the puddle and picked up the object, a Polaroid photograph, water already smearing the edges. Under the porch light, the image came into focus. A girl, bound at the wrists, sitting on a dirt floor. Her face was turned away, but the long dark hair, the small frame, it could have been Marissa. Beneath the photo, in shaky handwriting, 12 hours. By morning, Donnelly had every spare deputy combing the county roads to that truck, but no one found a trace. He kept the Polaroid locked in his desk, refusing to let it circulate. The last thing he needed was a town tearing itself apart again. Harris, however, wasn't convinced. "We can't sit on this, Chief. If that's Marissa..." "It's a girl," Donnelly cut in. "That's all we know. And we're not turning a maybe into a manhunt without facts. You sound like you don't want to find her." The remark stung more than Donnelly cared to admit. He'd spent years chasing ghosts in Pine Hollow, following dead-end leads that cost him friends, his marriage, and half his reputation. But Harris's tone, half accusation, half frustration, was too close to the whispers Donnelly heard every day. "You got something useful to say," Donnelly said evenly. "Say it. Otherwise, get out there and work." Harris slammed the door on his way out. Mary Ann's house, noon. The blinds were drawn tight, the air heavy with the smell of stale coffee. Mary Ann had been awake since Donnelly's visit at the diner, pacing, smoking, chain-drinking coffee until her hands trembled. When the knock came, she froze. Through the peephole, she saw Harris standing in the drizzle, hat pulled low. She opened the door only halfway. "What do you want?" "Answers," Harris said. "The chief's keeping things from you." Mary Ann's grip on the door tightened. "You think I don't know that? He's been keeping things from me for 6 years. He has a photo," Harris said, "of a girl tied up. Looks like Marissa. And a note, 12 hours. He's not acting on it." Mary Ann's pulse thudded in her ears. "Why are you telling me?" "Because if she's out there and he's stalling, someone else needs to move." She studied him for a long moment, reading the mix of anger and self-righteousness in his eyes. "And what's in it for you?" "Doing my job," Harris said. But the way he looked at her, like he needed her to believe him, made her uneasy. Back at the station, evening, Donnelly sat with a backpack, contents spread across the evidence table. Alongside the note, there had been a rusted key, a half-empty matchbox, and a broken wristwatch stopped at 2:17. Each piece gnawed at him. The key was small, maybe for a padlock. The matchbox bore the logo of a bar 20 miles outside town, the Lantern. He'd been there once, years back, following a lead on a stolen truck. It was the kind of place where conversations stopped when strangers walked in. He picked up the key, rolling it between his fingers. It felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. Duke lifted his head suddenly, ears pricked. Footsteps in the hall. Harris appeared in the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket. "Got something," he said. "Truck, sighting near the Miller farm." Donnelly's stomach tightened. Miller farm's been empty for years. Not according to the guy who saw the truck. Miller farm, night. The road to the farm was nothing more than 2 muddy ruts through the fields. Donnelly's cruiser jolted over them, headlights catching the skeletal outline of the barn ahead. The rain had eased, but fog curled low over the ground, swallowing sound. Harris stepped out first, scanning the perimeter with his flashlight. Donnelly followed, Duke close at heel. The barn doors hung open just enough to show darkness inside. Donnelly eased them apart, the hinges groaning like something waking from a long sleep. The smell hit first, damp wood, mildew, and something metallic underneath. Inside, dust motes swirled in the beam of their flashlights. A chair sat in the center of the dirt floor, rope coiled neatly beside it, and against the far wall, another backpack. Harris moved toward it, but Donnelly grabbed his arm. "Wait!" He shone the light higher, revealing a crude message scrawled on the wall in what looked like charcoal. "You're late." Something rustled in the loft above them. Duke barked sharply, the sound echoing in the rafters. Donnelly's flashlight caught a glimpse of movement, boots disappearing through a trapdoor in the far corner. They gave chase, bursting into the fog outside. But by the time they reached the tree line, the figure was gone. Harris kicked at the mud. "They were right there. We had him." Donnelly's gaze drifted back toward the barn. The second backpack still sat untouched. When he unzipped it, the contents were almost identical: a note, a key, a matchbox, a broken watch. But this time, the note said something different. "She knows the truth." Mary Ann's house, 2 hours later. Donnelly knocked harder this time. When there was no answer, he tried the handle. Unlocked. The living room was empty, a lamp still burning. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the counter. On the table was a folded piece of paper addressed to him. "Stop digging, or she dies." No signature, no other clue. Donnelly's hands curled into fists. He scanned the room again, noting the overturned ashtray, the way the front rug was rucked up near the door, as if someone had been dragged. He called for backup, but deep down he knew they were already hours behind. A back road, miles outside town. Mary Ann sat in the passenger seat of a moving vehicle, wrists bound, rain blurring the world beyond the glass. The driver said nothing, hands steady on the wheel. She couldn't see their face, just a reflection of the dashboard lights across a slick raincoat. But when they finally spoke, her blood turned cold. "I told you to stop asking questions," the voice said. She knew that voice, and it wasn't a stranger's. Station, 3 a.m. Donnelly stood over the map spread across the wall, red pins marking every lead from the last 24 hours. His eyes kept going back to one spot, the abandoned quarry north of town. It was remote, easy to hide in, and if the notes were meant to taunt him, it was the perfect place for a final meeting. He loaded Duke into the cruiser and headed out. The quarry road was slick with mud, the headlights barely cutting the thick fog. He parked near the old machinery and stepped out, the silence pressing in on him. Then he heard it, a single, sharp whistle cutting through the dark. Duke tensed, muscles coiled. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It wasn't who Donnelly expected. The figure emerged slowly from a mist, the beam of Donnelly's flashlight catching droplets on the brim of a hat. Harris. He stood just beyond the reach of the light, hands loose at his sides. Duke growled low in his throat. "You're alone," Harris said. It wasn't a question. Donnelly didn't answer. His gaze flicked behind the deputy, scanning for movement. "Where is she?" A thin smile touched Harris's lips. "Safe. For now." The fog swirled between them, carrying the faint tang of wet earth and rusted metal. "You've been running me in circles," Donnelly said. "Just giving you a taste of your own medicine," Harris replied, stepping closer. 6 years, Chief. 6 years you told this town. You were doing everything you could to find her. But the truth? You were protecting someone." Donnelly's grip on the flashlight tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know about the key," Harris said. "That little padlock key? I've seen one just like it. Belongs to the storage shed behind your old place. The same shed you accidentally forgot to search when Marissa disappeared." Donnelly's jaw worked, but he kept his voice even. "You're chasing ghosts." Harris's eyes glinted. "Am I? Or did you already know where she was back then?" 2 hours earlier. Mary Ann sat on a wooden chair, rope biting into her wrists. The room was cold, the concrete floor damp beneath her bare feet. She'd been blindfolded for most of the drive, but she could tell they were underground. Sound was close here, heavy, muffled. Footsteps approached, and the blindfold came off. Harris stood over her, raincoat dripping. Her first words were a whisper. "Why?" "Because you wouldn't stop," he said, "and because you deserve the truth." He dragged another chair across the floor, sitting opposite her. "Your daughter's not who you think she was." Mary Ann stared, heart pounding. She was 13. "And 13-year-olds don't keep secrets?" Harris said quietly. "She knew something about this town, about people you'd never suspect. And your good sheriff here, he made sure no one would ever hear it." Mary Ann's voice shook. "You're lying." "Am I? Because I can take you to the place she spent her last night. I can show you who was there." Back at the quarry, Donnelly's voice was low, but steady. "Where's Mary Ann?" "Nearby," Harris said. "But you're not going to see her until you admit what you did." "You think I had something to do with Marissa's disappearance?" "I know you did," Harris snapped. "And so does the person who's been leaving you those backpacks." That caught Donnelly off guard. "Not you?" Harris shook his head slowly. "No, but I figured out who it is. And once I did, I realized I could use their game to smoke you out." Duke's growl deepened. "Who's behind it, then?" Donnelly asked. Harris took a step forward, his expression unreadable. "Your brother." The name landed like a stone in Donnelly's gut. Cal Donnelly had left Pine Hollow years before Marissa vanished. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. Cal had been in trouble from the start. Fights, theft, always one step ahead of the law until he wasn't. "You've got nothing," Donnelly said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I've got a sighting," Harris said. 2 nights ago. The Lantern Bar. He's been in the county for weeks. Chief. And those matchboxes? They're his calling card. Underground. Mary Ann's wrists ached from the rope, but her mind was sharper than it had been in years. "Harris," she said carefully, "if Cal's the one who took her, why would the sheriff cover for him?" "Blood," Harris said simply. "It's thicker than justice for some folks." "But if Cal's still here," she pressed, "why haven't you gone after him?" Harris leaned back, a shadow of uncertainty crossing his face. "Because I need proof. And Donnelly's the only one who can give it to me." Quarry, minutes later. A flicker of movement drew Donnelly's attention to the ridge above the quarry. A figure stood silhouetted against the thin moonlight, watching. Tall, lean, familiar. Cal, looks like you've got your proof, Harris said, stepping back. Now go get him. But before Donnelly could move, Cal's voice rang out across the quarry. Funny thing about old secrets, brother, they rot, and when they rot, they smell. The next moment's blurred, Cal disappearing into the fog, Harris shouting something behind him, Duke straining at the lead. Donnelly followed the sound of footsteps along the quarry's edge, his flashlight cutting arcs through the mist. He found Cal near the old pump house, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting. You left that backpack? Donnelly demanded. Both of them, Cal said easily, and a few more you haven't found yet. Why? Cal's smile was cold. Because you let them think I took her, and you let them think she's dead. But you know damn well neither is true. Donnelly's pulse hammered. Where is she? Cal's eyes narrowed. Not here, not in this county. But she's alive, and if you want to keep her that way, you'll walk away from this. Underground. The door opened, and Cal stepped inside. Mary Ann's breath caught. You, she whispered. Cal crouched in front of her. Your daughter's safe, he said. Safer than she's ever been. But if you keep digging, they'll find her. And when they do, she's gone. Tears blurred her vision. Who? Cal's expression hardened. You don't want to know. Quarry, final moments. Harris arrived, gun drawn. Step away from him, Chief. Donnelly looked from Harris to Cal, realization dawning like a slow, sick tide. You two are working together. Cal grinned. Sometimes, enemies make the best partners. And just like that, Harris swung the gun toward Cal. Not anymore. The shot echoed through Quarry, sending Duke barking into the dark. When the smoke cleared, Cal was gone, vanished into the fog, leaving only the echo of his laughter. 3 days later, Mary Ann sat on her porch, a blanket around her shoulders. Donnelly stood at the bottom of the steps, hat in hand. She's alive, he said quietly. That's all I can promise you right now. But finding her is going to take time. Mary Ann's eyes searched his face. And if you don't... Donnelly looked away. The weight of the quarry, the backpacks, and his brother pressing down like a stone on his chest. Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying. She nodded once, her expression unreadable. I don't know if I trust you. You shouldn't, Donnelly said, turning back toward his truck. Not yet. That night, in the quiet of his office, Donnelly took the 2 backpacks from the evidence locker. He set them side by side on the table, staring at the contents. 2 keys, 2 matchboxes, 2 broken watches, and one truth. Someone was still moving the pieces. The rain began again, soft against the roof. Duke lay at his feet, watching him with dark, knowing eyes. In Pine Hollow, the case wasn't closed. Not even close. But for now, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Steady, patient, waiting.